Tilea's Troubles, Part 46. Morr Divided. Near Viadaza, Autumn 2402. Biagino had not at first thought it unusual that a fellow clergyman should wish to speak with him in private, but when he discovered it was to be a secret rendezvous with a Pavonan priest unknown to him at the ancient ruins beside Lago di Scandaro, that struck him as odd. The young messenger carrying the invitation only further stirred his suspicions. The gangly lad had been so agitated he was barely able to stand still for more than a moment, and although a youth who could surely be no more than a novitiate, yet he was tonsured and wore a cassock, and must therefore at least have made his temporary vows. Perhaps, Biagino thought, the purportedly schismatic Pavonan church had less strict requirements concerning the age at which brotherhood could be bestowed. Indeed, during the Trantian Sagranalian uprising, several decades previously, there had been a veritable army of boy monks, and Biagino had heard it said on several occasions that the Pavonan schism was an offshoot of old Father Sagranalo's revolutionary theology, although of a kind that fortuitously permitted the nobles to remain in power and the rich to remain in possession of their wealth, which suited Duke Guidobaldo of Pavona very well. Was he about to be lured into some radical Pavonan design? Of course, Biagino let none of this dissuade him. Considering all he had experienced, to shy away now from merely speaking with a fellow clergyman, even in secret, seemed ridiculous. If the priest had bad intentions, then it was best that Biagino learned of them, and if the man proved to be a true servant of Morr, then that too required his attention. Either way, he must play along. It was late afternoon when Biagino approached the tumble-down temple. All was calm, the lake waters adding to the peacefulness. Were he still a boy, the chance to sit by the water's edge and skim stones would have been irresistible. The only urge that vaguely tugged at him now was to take advantage of the quiet, to lie down and to sleep. That would mean dreaming, however, which for him was not at all restful. For in sleep his mind ran fast and deep into realms removed in both time and place, there to reveal horrors into which he sank deep. The urge to rest was a remnant of his youth, no longer an activity to enjoy. There were 4 persons waiting. The priest who had sent the invitation, Father Claudio, was immediately obvious, standing ahead of the others and elevated a little by the lie of the ground. He was a large man of many chins, clothed in a grey, coarse woolen cassock, so well fed that he was likely to be a priest of some authority. There was also the boy brother Biagino had already met, while the others were either lay brothers, flagellating dedicants, or some unique Pavonan admixture of the two. The boy brother carried an axe, more tool than weapon, but held in such a way that it was clearly intended as the latter. One of the dedicants had a viciously barbed mace and a lighted torch in his other hand. It was not yet dark, and Biagino struggled to guess why it was lit. Had they made their way here through some underground passage? Were they intending to burn something, or scare wild animals away? Neither theory seemed likely. The other dedicant lurched drunkenly, his arm extended as if to steady himself against some unseen support. It occurred to Biagino that the man's condition was likely due to an over-exuberance and his self-administered admonishments, a common cause of injury, instability or insanity in flagellants. Father Claudio had apparently been engaged in prayer as Biagino arrived, and now gestured the conclusion of his prayers by bringing his hands together.
"Good day to you, Brother Biagino," he said. "Holiest Morr protect and guide you and yours. Are you alone?"
"There's just me, brother," Biagino answered cheerfully. "Why, were you expecting others?" Father Claudio simply smiled, shaking his head so that his jowls wobbled.
"You have the ear of the arch-lector, yes?"
Biagino had expected this, just not so soon. Ever since the raising of the Holy Viadazan army, he had received appeals, requests and entreaties of many varieties to be passed on to those in power, whether military, secular or clerical. It was rare that petitioners were so abrupt, however. He chose not to answer, and instead asked, "You've come from Trantio?"
"Sadly, yes, we have,"
said Father Claudio.
"A terrible thing. the fall of such a great city to plundering brutes. It greatly shames Tilea that such can happen, yes?"
Biagino wanted to ask, was it worse than when the city fell to you Pavonans? Instead, he said, "There are wicked foes all around. This is not an easy time for Tilea. Yet we ought not despair, for Kernag's Wag has been defeated in the south, and the vampires in the north now face our Holy Army, having already been driven from Viadaza. If the princes in between would stop squabbling among themselves and deal with this Razga Boulderguts, then all would be put right again."
"Squabbling?" repeated Father Claudio. "Ah, but hasn't it always been thus? The way of things in Tilea, yes? The goddess of war would diminish to nothing if it were not so. Yet it is one thing for Tileans to wrestle over matters of honour and revenge, another thing entirely for orc, vampire, and ogres to loot, burn, and murder. Our Duke Guidobaldo knows full well when it is time to put aside territorial disputes and slights against him and his own, and instead make a stand against evil."
The Duke certainly took his time to come to this realization, thought Biagino. "It is a great shame that the realm of Trantio has fallen," he said, "not once but twice, and the second time to be left abandoned and ruined. Where have its people gone?" Father Claudio gave no indication that he recognized the implied criticism.
"Those who did not perish fled, some south to Astiano, some west to Remus, and some, as you can see, north to Viadaza."
"Come to join our holy war against the undead," suggested Biagino.
"Come to ask the Archlector to recognise the war is now made larger, and that he cannot leave central Tilea to its fate while he completes his vow to destroy the vampires in the north. To do so would be folly, yes, for there would be no home for his victorious Holy Army to return to, nothing left of what they are trying to defend."
"So," asked Biagino, "I take it then that you want me to ask the Archlector to commit forces to fight against the ogres?"
"He must. Not to do so would be the gravest folly."
Biagino began to wonder whether Father Claudio was working entirely on his own initiative, as his words and Duke Guidobaldo's actions did not sit well together. "But the Duke himself has ordered that his son and the Pavonan force he commands continue here, in the service of the Holy Army of Morr," said Biagino.
"As is only proper," replied Father Claudio, "for Duke Guidobaldo is Mor's truest servant, and his son has made a holy vow. The Archlector has other forces, however, his garrison at Remus, a whole army of mercenary Arabians already bound to his service, and plenty more mercenaries available for employment. My lord will do all he can to defeat Razga. That goes without saying, yes? But if his strength should prove insufficient, it is not only Trantio and Pavona that will suffer. Boulderguts cannot be ignored by Remus, nor can the fight against him be delayed, whether that be until the war in the north is won, or until Razga is before the very walls of Remus." "The Archlector is guided by Holy Morr," said Biagino, "divinely inspired to know when and how best to act. Yet you are right. He cannot know the true desires of Tilean princes unless he is made aware of them." Biagino paused, wondering whether he should give voice to such a line of thought, for it might unduly encourage and embolden such men as these. Best, he thought, to blather instead, so as to obfuscate what he had already said. "Holy Morr concerns himself with the fight against the undead," he continued, "and guarding our souls in his garden so that we may rest undisturbed for all eternity. To him it matters most that we do not succumb to evil after our death. We, his priests, must also concern ourselves with the living, however, for not only are we ourselves living and therefore cannot do otherwise, but we must act as guides for those on the path to Morr's garden, so that their souls may reach its sanctuary." Biagino could see that Father Claudio's eyes were glazing over, and knew his tactic was working. "It is not right," he continued, "to hasten our own end or that of our flock, however, for Morr prefers to welcome us when he is ready to do so, not when the servants of foul gods cause our deaths." Here Biagino's words dried up, for he had so effectively meandered in his meaning that he himself knew not what to say next. Father Claudio gave a confused chortle. I thank you for your sermon, brother, and I am cognizant of the Church's teachings."
The torchbearer thrust his arm forwards, causing the flame to sputter. His eyes were glaring, sunk deep into his face, like that of a starving man, yet his bare arms revealed muscles aplenty.
"When Morr tests us,"
declared the man in a Trantian accent,
"'tis no easy thing. He doesn't play with us, tickle us, tease us, like a loving mother would her infant child. He teaches us through suffering. We become strong through those trials, and so ready to thwart any necromantic threat. The undead are the first enemy, Rasca's ogres the second, being a trial to truly test our faith. To fight both is not easy, because to serve Morr is not easy. But fight both we must."
Biagino now knew for certain the man was a flagellant, for his words contained the mantra of such creatures. Besides, only someone with an agonizing commitment to Morr would fail to balk at interrupting the conversation of two senior priests. The man was probably a captain among the flagellants.
"My companion Brizio knows the truth of it,"
said Father Claudio.
"It is scarred into his flesh. We must indeed fight both undead and ogres. If we fail against the ogres, then Tilea is burned, our dead unguarded, and the vampires will work their evil all the more widely, raising wicked legion after legion to serve them. The fall of Trantio is most assuredly a sign of Morr's displeasure. It is clear now that our Lord's removal of the tyrant prince was not punishment enough for the people of Trantio, and that the gods saw fit to allow the city to fall completely, despite our worthy attempts to cleanse it. All Tileans must work together to prove to Morr that they are indeed deserving of his love. And we cannot ask for Morr's blessing without obeying his commands, nor can we expect to enter his garden without accepting his wrath. You must surely recognize, yes, that Morr is not merely the king of gods, but the god of gods. If the lesser gods think to test us, how much more so the god of gods?"
Biagino looked at each of them, one dedicant with his crazed expression, the other reeling unsteadily, the boy priest hopping from foot to foot as if stood upon a hot griddle, and Father Claudio staring down at him like a disapproving teacher. These were indeed disciples of the Pavonan schism. Claudio had openly admitted it, and they were strange in their beliefs as well as their ways. Of course, he wasn't going to tell them this, not when he was here alone, unarmed, apart from his hidden stiletto. "Your request would be taken more seriously if presented formally, and with proof of Duke Guidobaldo's agreement," Biagino advised. "And if you and your companions were not schismatic fools," he thought. Father Claudio nodded. "That can be done, yes," he said. "I shall speak with Lord Silvano, for he knows his father's wishes. If he knew also that the Archlector was likely to listen, then I am certain that he himself would present our case." Biagino now wondered who it was had most likely sent these men to speak to him. The young Lord Silvano had not shown his face at the army's councils since the trial of his men for their ill-disciplined attack against the Campergrottan ogres. It had been supposed that he was racked with indecision concerning whether to leave and return southwards or stay with the Holy Army. Perhaps instead it had been the youthful embarrassment of having to admit that he had lost control of his troops, while they had lured him away so that they could do what they desired. Mind you, knowing the boy's family, it might instead be that he was annoyed that he had not given the order for the assassinations himself. And if none of these, then it could be simply a matter of pride. The need to know his request would be taken seriously, rather than risk being shamed by a brusque refusal. Whatever the truth, it seemed likely these men had been tasked with obtaining an invitation from the Archlector for Silvano to attend upon him, thus saving the boy's face and allowing him to present his father's wishes. "Leave it with me, good father," said Biagino. "I can but speak a word or two, here and there, then we shall see." Gladly taking leave of the party, Biagino returned the way he had come. The whole encounter made little sense to him. In the end, he decided that Lord Silvano's inexperience must be to blame for such a bizarre and roundabout method to gain an audience with the Archlector, if indeed that is what it was. It also occurred to him that the Archlector, wise as he was in the ways of the world, should perhaps have recognised the need to reassure young Silvano that his presence was still desired at the council table. Once Biagino began to ponder the request to assist the fight against the ogres, however, any clarity he was beginning to feel slipped away, to be replaced with a heady concoction of doubts, fears and frustrations, riddled with images from half-remembered and less than half-comprehended dreams. Was this really the time, as Tilea faced doom at the hands of vampires and ogres, to pander to schismatics? Could they be a symptom of a gangrenous rot growing within the Tilean Church of Morr? And was the best course right now to placate tyrant princes? Could Pavona be the rusted hinge that caused the bolted door to Tilea to break? Or were the ogres the real danger, threatening to fatally wound Tilea as it was distracted by the vampires in the north? Biagino was glad he was neither lector, prince, nor general, but then of late he was not particularly happy to be himself.